technology in Nepal, and better known as ANSET. ANSET is a non-governmental organization that has been very active in Nepal and the South and Southeast of Asia for the past 30 years, and is highly involved in trying to, in disaster risk reductions and in building resilience in the Nepalese nation against natural hazards. Dr. Ramesh Guragain has a PhD degree from the earthquake engineering from the University of Tokyo. He joined the ANSET in 2000 and has been working in the field of earthquake risk management for since then, working in many other countries besides Nepal, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and many other. And mainly on assessment, seismic risk assessment of buildings, of infrastructures, and urban and rural settlement in Nepal. He had a very important role in the aftermath of the earthquake in 2015, about which he will speak today. And he has, for his role at ANSET, he has as much a strong input in the technical aspect as also into the socio-political aspects of making disaster risk management and disaster risk reductions a major issue for the country. So without further ado, we look forward to listen to his experience and lesson learned from his work in this role. Thank you very much, Ramesh.
Thank you very much, Dina. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you, all of you. I'm talking about our experiences on and lessons on seismic retrofitting of masonry buildings in Nepal. I hope the slide is clear for every one of you. The scope of the work and the basis of my talk today is based on our retrofitting experience. We have so far retrofitted about 300 schools in Nepal, more than 100 residences, both urban and rural, some of the health institutions, and some other important facilities. And also our experiences are replicated in Bhutan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, for some of the schools retrofit program and others. And then, we started retrofitting quite long ago, and there was earthquake in 2015. And then 2015 earthquake tested all of our retrofitting works. And then all 100% of the retrofitted buildings perform very nice. And this is the, the basis of my talk today. I'll be, giving some background information and also initiation of the retrofitting work. I'll talk a little bit about the retrofitting techniques, those simple methods that we are implementing here in Nepal. I'll share some of the methods that we are implementing. We also are connected with research and then trying to help those researches are linked to policy and practices. We need the strong stakeholders engagement, and we do have some experience on that. So I'll share how we are doing, cost of retrofitting, financing and incentives, and also finally the challenges, conclusions, way forward. We are in very high seismic hazard zone. This is a the global earthquake model map. We are somewhere here in the the north of India, in between India and China, and you can see all this red strip there. That's basically Nepal mostly. So we are in very high seismic hazard zone. We have our one seismic hazard map also. That's for most of the country. It's a 10% probability of accidents in 50 years. It's about 0.4 G. That's for most of the area, urbanized area. So that's the the seismic hazard in Nepal. This is also known facts that globally during earthquake, most of the people get killed because of the buildings collapse. This is the global scenario from Earthquake Protection Handbook. And then, about from 1.4 million fatalities, about 900,000 people are killed just because of the masonry buildings. If we combine all other buildings, then it comes up, the more than 80% of the people get killed. And then that's more even in developing countries. For example, Gorkha earthquake, we thought almost similar, that about 80% of the people may get killed because of the building collapse, and then the remaining about 20% may get killed because of the lack of emergency response or others. But the region that we found was about 99% people got killed because of the either buildings or infrastructures collapse, and it's mostly the buildings. And then these data, 1.5 million, that does not include the the Bhuj earthquake, Kashmir earthquake, Iran or Gorkha earthquake, the new earthquakes after 2000. But still, if we sum up all this, then the ratio becomes even more, because most of the people are still getting killed because of the collapse of masonry buildings or other buildings. So in that context, in Nepal, from NCET side, we are working in all three streams actually. One is, and the easiest one is to make all the new buildings earthquake resistant. That's the most easiest one, and then cost effective one. We do have the programs to support building code implementation, many programs, the awareness raisings and others for the making new buildings safer. But we already have so many millions existing buildings, and most of them are vulnerable. So unless we retrofit these buildings, we cannot really reduce the existing risk. And then the preparedness for developing effective emergency response and others are also very important, but we cannot reduce the risk in terms of potential casualty and injuries, because most of it comes from the buildings anyway. So in that context, we started retrofitting. It was need-based start. We did the assessment of the school buildings, public school buildings in Kathmandu Valley quite long ago in 1996-97. And then this was the result that came from the risk assessment, that should there be an intensity 9 level of shaking, about 2/3 of our public school buildings may get collapsed, and then the another 10 or 11% they will still damage, and then also to the extent that we cannot repair, and about a quarter, about 23%, 25%, they will still get damaged, but to the repairable level. So all 100% of the buildings, schools at that time, we found that they suffer significant damage. Some are still within the range of repairable, all others are not. So in that scenario, the retrofitting was the only prominent alternate. One of the thinking was, okay, if we have the vulnerable schools, demolish all of them and then reconstruct. Of course, that's good. Perhaps better also if you have a lot of money. But who will fund those? And then, in Nepal context, when we have so many other priorities, it's impossible to prioritize, and then having such a large amount of the money. So at that time in 1997, we started, and then tried the first retrofit of schools building as a masonry school building in Nepal. It's very simple, easy to do masonry school buildings. And in our region, there are not many buildings retrofitted before that. We explored at least our subcontinent if there are any, and then we didn't have any the schools prior to any earthquake damage or earthquake, assessed and retrofitted. And there are many questions, is it possible to retrofit such type of brick and mud buildings technically? How much does it cost? Do people accept that? Our, the local craft persons and then the masons, can they do it or not? So there are many questions for us. And we started with this simple school. We found some literature, some methods, and then we tried that. And then perhaps we did slightly over than what was required also at that time. But we tried with, you can see in the the right left corner, the corner of the building. So it's a simple micro concreting with some small rebars mesh. So that's the type of the retrofit that we chose, and we did this retrofitting work. And then during the retrofitting process, because this was new in our communities, the working masons, they asked that, okay, why we are doing this? This is for the existing building, and then you are breaking some part, adding some elements. What's the reason? And then we thought that, okay, without helping them to understand why we are doing this, they will not do it properly. Only telling them that, okay, do you do this one or that work, it does, it may not help. So we started training the the local craft persons, the masons, even in retrofit and the earthquake resistant constructions and others. And then this masons training that started from this retrofitting program became so famous that we had this curricula. And then after, let's say, 2015 Gorkha earthquake, about 70,000 masons were trained, not only by NCET, by all the organizations, based on the curricula that we developed. And this came from these questions from the masons originally when we were retrofitting. And then when they were convinced, they thought that they knew the technique and they understood the importance of it, but they felt that why don't we from NCET convince the parents about the importance of retrofitting, so that they can support and help on retrofitting because they know the technique. And then in new constructions, the same, the retrofitting is challenging and then costly, but why not for even for the new constructions and then all this. So they asked us to gather the parents and then talking to them about the safety, not only the schools but their houses also need to be resilient. So that's how we started with the convincing the parents, and then talking to the students and the teachers and the orientations, and then bringing the ministers and others. And this is how we started our retrofitting work in Nepal. And then it became a comprehensive program with a good the stakeholders engagement, primarily three part: the awareness raising and the knowledge sharing and involving, the training part, and then the construction part. So this is how it started. And then before Gorkha earthquake, we had retrofitted about 260 school buildings throughout Nepal with different fundings. The fundraise from different funding organizations, small, bigger, the USAID, the UNICEF, Plan, some other NGOs. So many organizations supported our program, and then NCET, directly involved for the retrofitting of 260 school buildings prior to Gorkha earthquake. And many of those school buildings were in the highly earthquake affected area. You can see the area Kathmandu and around. So those are the the places heavily affected by 2015 Gorkha earthquake. And then all of those school buildings, I have some examples from the buildings within Kathmandu Valley. So you see, these are some of the photographs after Gorkha earthquake of the buildings retrofitted. And all of these school buildings are masonry, either low strength masonry with brick in mud mortar or brick in cement mortar, or some cases even the stone masonry. But all are masonry school buildings that we retrofitted, mostly 2 stories or 3 stories school buildings. And then all of these school buildings perform very well. So this is the one of the schools that you can see in the map. So the That's in the photograph. You can see the retrofitted part is slightly projected outside. So, and then all of these schools, some were even still under retrofitting during 2015. We had a program at that time to retrofit 50 schools in a year with the Department of Education, and we are retrofitting, and then there was earthquake. Some of the schools were even they're near to finish retrofit, and they still perform quite well with the under retrofitting work. And all these schools, because in our approach we engage communities from the beginning to raise awareness, and then we knew that there were many better or even more resilient residential buildings in our communities, but none of us, or none of the communities, had trust to even their own building, and they came to the schools because they were meant for earthquake safety. They were retrofitted, so they had, let's say, more faith on the schools that they are retrofitted, and they came and then stay there for there for some time. We knew that those retrofitted their own houses might have been even better sometimes. Many of them not, but some were better, but still they had more trust because of this the approach we took as a community-based engagement approach. The first school we retrofitted, the one that I showed earlier, also the starting point, and we went and then see that school also, because it was already the 18 years after implementation during earthquake, and then nothing happened, even no cracks. The school was perfect. So we visited all of those retrofitted schools, mostly, as I mentioned, 2 to 3 stories. You can see different color, different schools, but all were performed very well. That's the point. There are some cases, we did not retrofit all the school blocks of same schools, because we had limited school buildings retrofitted. So there are many cases, they did not get even crack the retrofitted buildings, but others one which were not retrofitted. Sometimes even the concrete, so-called reinforced concrete, though small concrete columns, they completely collapsed or were severely damaged, even in the same compound. So this is one of the example in the the north of Kathmandu Valley, Bhagyodaya School. So in the left side, you can see this the pink block. It's actually U-shaped block, quite larger one. It is a brick and mud buildings that we retrofitted prior to the earthquake, and then that sustained quite well, and then even no cracks, and it was used as emergency shelter after earthquake. And in the right side, you can see this pink is the same block again, and then another block here, 4 stories. That's the reinforced concrete school buildings, larger block, and that was the severely damaged and needed to demolish and reconstruct. All the retrofitted school buildings performed well, but more than 6,000 schools collapsed in 2015 earthquake in the same area. So that shows very clearly the retrofitting worked very well. The retrofitting techniques that we use is a simple retrofitting techniques. The first one is, we call it splint and bandage. That we coined this name from the medical terminology. The splint are the vertical, when the hand is get fractured, then you put the splint, and then you put the bandage. So just to have the similar the terminology here, we term this as a splint and bandage, and in our guidelines and standards, this terminology is now used. So it just mean that you have the vertical and the horizontal elements, a sort of the horizontal and vertical bands from outside and inside of the wall of the buildings, and then they are connected like here. In the left, you can see the rebars going, and then right, we use the micro concrete and plaster after that. So these are the horizontal and vertical bands connected from inside and outside, let's say. So this is, we call it splint and bandage. This type of the retrofitting technique we use for many of these schools, which are cement-based schools up to 2 stories mostly. and then and then in good, relatively good quality. For the other schools which are relatively bad quality masonry work or 3 stories, or depending again, of course we have to calculate as an engineer, so depending on the demand, the other retrofitting technique that we used was a complete jacketing of the walls, again with a reinforcement and micro concrete. We use generally the manual shortcutting, simple. The concrete is designed mostly for the the cover, and also very little shear. Most of the requirement will be fulfilled by the reinforcement that we put. So this is how we design and then implemented as the reinforced concrete jacketing, thin layer of concrete with reinforcement. In some cases, considering the space and then to implement it fast, especially in the residential buildings, we use even this type of the welded galvanized wire mesh, so that we don't need to use a concrete thicker layer, but this thin plaster will work, and as it is galvanized, there's the minimum problem of rusting and others. So we use this also in many of the buildings to retrofit, including some of the schools and then mostly residential buildings. We used this polypropylene, the mesh jacketing also for, especially 1-story small mud-based adobe or brick and mud buildings. That's based on the research at the University of Tokyo. That we did this also in 2008, 2009 in some of the buildings, and then they also performed quite well in 2015. This is the PP band is the material that generally used for packing, and then we prepare the mesh, and then it's the sunlight affects this material a lot because it's plastic based material, so we have to cover. But if there is a proper coverage, then it's good because it doesn't get damaged because of the water. So it's a good material, very light, very cheap, and then we use in some of the buildings this also. We have combination as well. Why we use this material is because it's cheap, light, and then we have the splint and bandage. But you see in some cases it's not enough, especially to prevent the local failure. So we have some other methods of mixing these also. So in critical locations, let's say above the window or the lintel level or the sill level, corners, near to doors, those critical, the high stress or stress concentration places, we put slightly stronger material of similar to splint and bandage, and then in all the remaining places we can use the polypropylene band. We have done this, for example, you can see in the picture, in the some area with less stress concentration, you can use the low strength materials. In some cases, even we have the welded strong mesh near to the openings or corners, and then in other cases the widely spaced GI wires also instead of the PP band. So we have different combinations of these the jacketing and then these methods. For example, this one you can see here at the just below the window or the corners and the middle part, you can see some the closed mesh, stronger the welded wire mesh, and in other areas you can see it's the wider spaced GI wires also. So we have a combination of these methods as well. And then in addition to the schools, the residences, some of the health institutions, this is after Gorkha earthquake, by the way. So we retrofitted some of the larger, the high attention buildings also. For example, this is a retrofitting of the Supreme Court. There's still masonry buildings, 3 stories, but as a signature building in Kathmandu Valley, as a Supreme Court, we retrofitted this to draw attention of the possibility, as well as to demonstrate the the importance in other important buildings to retrofit as well. So we have implemented and used different retrofitting techniques, mostly these 2-3 different types, and then a combination of those. So these are the retrofitting techniques that we used. In terms of the research, we have the both the experiments as well as the numerical simulations. Our research has done mostly in collaboration with the universities in Nepal and outside Nepal. NCED is not a completely research organization, so we are more of the implementation oriented organizations, but we have very strong link of or let's say we work as a very strong link between the research and then the implementation. So our intention is bringing the research outcomes or the research results to the communities, to the cities, to the schools, to the people over here in Nepal, if there is already a good research done. If not, and not sufficient, then the request the universities to do that research. In some cases, we get involved as a joint research also, and in some cases we just offer the avenue for sending and hosting professors and students so that they can do the right research for us. So there are multiple ways of getting involved from NCET for this type of the research, especially for the masonry buildings and retrofitting. We had the quite significant collaborations with the University of Tokyo and also Beijing Normal University for some of the researches that we did. Some part of that was their own research, some based on our joint research. And then this type of starting from even element level test, non-retrofitted, but based on our real problem. For example, after 2015 earthquake, we had to retrofit stone masonry buildings, and then there were relatively very less research globally. So we had to do the research in this case ourselves. So we had a joint proposal with the Beijing Normal University. Professor Dina Dayala was also a part of the international the advisory group for that work. So we had the research starting from the this type of the cyclic test for 2.4 meter height, 2.1 meter width, this type of the full scale wall for different types of the earthquake safety elements. And this is for the new constructions, for the the timber elements, and how much safety we can get out of that, but including for the retrofitting options that we proposed earlier, and then we analyzed for the this galvanized wire mesh. But we didn't have the sufficient the research, especially for the stone masonry. Earlier we used mostly for the brick, so we wanted to check those. And then you can see here, I forgot to mention earlier, you see in this case the non-retrofitted one, the total deflection was, the maximum was 38 millimeter, and then total maximum the peak load was 60 kilonewton for this case. Relatively good wall, well saved stones. And then okay, in this case the retrofitted one, you can see here is the deflection is 185, and then the load was the 147, so almost 5 times more deflection capacity, and then at least 2.5 times more load resisting capacity. So it's quite significant the safety. But these are still at the element level. And then later on these are the comparisons you can see here. So this black is non-retrofitted one, the red one is with the the highest performance with the with this galvanized wire mesh jacketing. And then but also after the element level test, we conducted the set table test for almost full scale buildings, about this 2/3 scale. Yeah, so it was a 0.3G L centro, and then the non-retrofitted building collapsed at that stage, and we stopped the further testing of this block. And then we had the another building, again starting from 0.05, 0.1, 0.15, 0.2 G. We continued that test, and this is up to the 1G. That was the maximum capacity of the sectable. Yeah, so we could test up to 0.8G, and then 1G we could not even completely test because the SIG table was stopped. But the starting from 0.1G and then going up to the 0.8G and even 1G was quite big. And then there was quite some deflections of the buildings. You can see even the shape, but none of the stones fell down, and then building was perfect even that level, almost 3 times in comparison to the non-retrofitted building. So that's the type of the research that we got involved based on whatever was the real problem that we are facing and the type of the retrofitting techniques that we use here in Nepal, and then at least some of them we tested, and then for the PP band retrofitting technique, it's mostly the University of Tokyo work. I graduated from there, and then it was part of my master's and also some of my PhD work. Yeah, but it is still a small scale, 1:4 scale, and just to compare, and then more for the numerical, to develop the numerical simulations and to verify the numerical the work. So those are used for that purpose. But at the same time, we have full scale sectable test also, and you can see here it was sinusoidal wave, 3 horse, 600 gal, retrofitted by polypropylene band. It's just a 1-story full scale model. Yeah, you saw it. The PP band actually did not stop getting crack of the buildings, but it somehow basketed all the materials together and then prevent the collapse. And then from all these tests, we decided that it's not good to implement the PP band retrofit for the 2 or 3 stories buildings, but only for the single story buildings because of the considering the large deflection, and then also that allows the cracking. But all of these researches in case of Nepal are translated to the the national guidelines, so that the wider all the professionals can use that. And then based on all the researches and then also the implementation practices, so we do have a the repair and retrofitting manual for masonry structures, and it's similar for reinforced concrete as well. So this is how we link the our research to practice, and practice to policies or the guidelines. So this is the level of the work that we have been doing in that line. In terms of the stakeholders engagement, that's again very critical. And then you see, without a proper engagement, it's very difficult to promote retrofit. And then it requires a lot of the information, because there are so many stakeholders. They actually influence the house owner, who is at the core, to decide for retrofit in terms of let's say the residential buildings. So the friends and families are the nearest one for any decision making, including the retrofit. We have the local masons also, because they are the one generally support construction of the houses in most part of the country. We have the engineers and the consultants, the vendors, the material producers, academic and research institutions to do the research. We have the local governments, the local community, and municipal engineers as another group that influence also. We have the central government and the provincial government to formulate all those guidelines and the policies. We have other partner organizations, donors for funding, CSOs, CBOs for the advocacy, and others. And we have media also to play a role. So there are so many stakeholders who are involved and require involvement to promote retrofit. And that's why we need a very comprehensive program to include all of them, so that the concept move forward. And especially for any new concept in the society, we have to have all these players or all stakeholders get involved on those. So we learned this from our building code implementation program earlier, that considering all these stakeholders, actually we have three types ultimately, or three actions also required. The awareness raising or information sharing, that's for some groups or some stakeholders, that basically to increase the demand. So we have to have the activities to raise awareness so that the proper demand is there in place. The second category of the people are the who will provide or supply that demand, and these are the the engineers, the masons, the consultants, and others who design, material producers, and others who supply those requirements. And then we have other type of the stakeholders. They get engaged more for the from the policy or the the authority point of view, to make it mandatory, or even to authorize that and give the permit and others. So the local governments, the federal governments, or the central government, so more related to the policies, guidelines, process in place. So considering all these three actions and then three types of the stakeholders, we designed our program. So we have the awareness raising program for retrofit, we had the capacity building program, and then we had the institutionalization. So in awareness raising, we included the community groups, house owners, social leaders, and others, through information, through videos, through talk, through a lot of the television program. I forgot to include those in the presentation, but we had the perhaps more than 50 television episodes related to retrofit. We are broadcasted from national television. So awareness raising. The second is capacity building. So the the training to engineers, training to technicians, training to masons, training to homeowners, and others. And then we have to support again through guidelines, checklist, mechanism, process to the local governments, federal or the central governments also. So we included all of these as a strategy to have all these in place. So the house owners of the community, so from the awareness program. What we cover is, the concern on safety. So we have to change their risk perceptions. So we have to discuss how much does it cost, what are the short-term and long-term benefits, and then also if there are many people knowing these facts, then there will be a peer, the pressure to them as well. And then what worked well in terms of the lessons in all these awareness raising activities was, the physical demonstration is the best, because only talking, even sharing the poster, or the talking even in the televisions did not impact in comparison to if you have the real building retrofitted and then show it from the foundation to the roof, and then let them touch, feel, pull, and then check it. They don't know the calculation, but observing the physical model is, we found, is best in terms of information sharing and awareness, especially for retrofit, because it's a new work, and then demonstration itself will be a good awareness raising. And then we require not only the family from the same household, but all the communities coming together and observing and looking, and then even checking with them about how much does it cost and others. So all those transparent informations helped convince people, together with other information packets for other types of the buildings, the cost informations, the how much human resources required, how many masons required, how long in terms of time, what are the key concepts. So different types of the information package, but the physical demonstrations and then community engagement were the based on that. For the capacity strengthening, for the masons and contractors, again, is we have to again give a hands-on training. So for retrofit, what we found was, together with the discussions in the classes for more conceptual levels, and then explaining why that is so important to do that way. And in on-site, we help them to understand what to do and how to do. So both of these are very important. Unless they do it, they don't know what to do. But if we just focus on what to do and then only in on-site, they don't, or they may not know the reason why we are doing this. And then unless they know the answer for why we are doing this way, they may forget again, and then the next, there is a huge chance that they made mistake. So for engineers also and for masons also, we combined these theoretical trainings and the field observations, or field the on-site, the hands-on exercises and skills. So our retrofitting training for masons goes for almost a 1 month long training, starting from a whole building foundation to roof. It's a part of even the the real retrofit work, but complemented by some theoretical sessions or classrooms, discussions, problem sharings and others. So they know the skills, and they also know the reasons why we do that that way. For the engineers also, slightly heavy part on the the discussions and then design, and then the design process, seismic retrofit design of masonry buildings and others part. But at the same time, to build the confidence, the field observations were really important. For the institutionalizations, we had to have the the guidelines. They are very important, consensus guidelines mostly. And then it required a lot of workshops, discussions, again the demonstrations. So combining all these activities, we could come up with a national level guidelines and manuals, but at the same time a process in place, institutional process in place, how they will give the permit for the retrofit, who will check the quality of those works and others. So this is how we did in terms of the stakeholders engagement for different 3 streams of the the stakeholders. Now come to the cost of retrofitting. Again, it depends on which retrofitting technique we use. For this type of the welded, galvanized iron mesh and GI wires type of the jacketing type of the work, is Nepali rupees 450 to 500 per square feet. That's how much it's 130 Nepali rupees is $1. So the so yeah, $4 or $5 per square feet of the plinth area. So starting from that, if you the 200 square feet, and then one story, a small house, it cost about 850 US dollar, and then it's bigger than 1400 plus 50. If it's a one story plus mezzanine floor, a small floor on top, that's common in Nepal. So that's you can see as 1300, 2000, and then 2 stories, and then this. So this is what the cost for this type of the retrofit. This is an average of those 100 plus buildings that we retrofitted, and then also the cost for today's rate. For example, this is a real building that we retrofitted. On the left before retrofit, right after retrofit, and then for this one it cost about 450,000 Nepali rupees. That's divided by 130 is about 4,000 US dollar, let's say. So that's the cost for retrofit for this type of retrofitting technique. The PP band is much cheaper. So 1,000 per square meter. That means 100 per square feet, less than $1 per square feet of the plinth area. Of course, the material itself is the less than $100 total for this type of the building. So that's the the cost for the PP band retrofit. Is very economic. For the school buildings retrofitting, which requires slightly more the materials to be on safer side, and then their performance required to be much higher than the residential buildings. But in all the cases, retrofitting costs in our case was 20 to 30% of the reconstruction cost. So that's the that's the tentative idea for the cost of retrofitting for the methods that we use. Now the financing and incentives is very critical, and then also very important. And then the success of retrofitting to make to move it forward depends on these also. In our case, for the schools, we started from very small numbers as a demonstration. Started as one school first, very small, because you don't need a large amount of funding to start with, one school. And then next year it was 4 schools, and then 10 schools, and then 15 schools, that way. So we started building upon 1, 10, 4, 10, like this. And then it took several years for the larger funding organizations and then the federal level authorities to get convinced to the idea. And then also we had sufficient experience on doing this. Then once the Department of Education took the leadership, considering the importance and then also viability of retrofit, we had the hundreds of schools retrofitted at once. So, and then they took the funding from the basket from multiple donors. So they had the education fund, and then from that fund we started retrofitting. And even now at this stage, about 141 schools, about 1,000 school buildings are under retrofitting. After of course the importance was realized after 2015 Gorkha earthquake. It's much easier now in comparison to what it used to be earlier before the earthquake. And then for the public buildings, including schools, it's 100% funding comes from the program itself. For the residences, it's even more complex. After Gorkha earthquake, it was easier because at least the government provided about 100,000 Nepali rupees, equivalent to 800 US dollar now. Provided by reconstruction program, and that was about 20 to sometimes even 80% of the retrofitting cost. If it's a very small house, then it was 80%. If it's a slightly bigger average, then it's about 20% of the retrofitting cost was covered by this amount. But even with this amount, just a very small amount, and most of the cases is what, as I mentioned, 20-25% of the budget required for retrofitting. With awareness, proper awareness, trainings, and helping through type designs, most of the the communities were they're happy to retrofit their houses, and they retrofitted. But without awareness, training, and then other technical support, because they didn't have information, they didn't have trust, they were not confident in others to retrofit. So there was relatively small number of the people who retrofitted houses. We also implemented some of the programs outside earthquake affected area, even now with the area that potentially be impacted by future earthquakes. So in those cases also, they about $800 or 1,000 is enough for most of the residential buildings, to inspire them and then to motivate them to retrofit. So that's the tentative cost. So in our estimates, if we have a massive retrofitting program, so this is the budget that we have to, the budget from the government side, and then the individuals may pay the remaining, and then it's possible to retrofit. So we implemented about 10 buildings just last year with this scheme, and then there is such a huge demand from the community that everybody want to do it if there is this level of the support. So there's some incentives we found is very important and critical for to motivate the residences to retrofit, but it's not a huge, again, cost per building. The challenges, scaling up is a really huge challenge. I mean, we have sufficient cases, so many schools retrofitted, they're 400, 500 now schools, the residences also, and then different retrofitting techniques. We have the masons, we have engineers trained, we have we have quite many successful small cases, but the scale is so big. I did some calculation. For example, the even previous census, we had total 5.5 million houses in Nepal. About 800,000 was rebuilt after Gorkha earthquake, and then 10 to 20% buildings might be resilient and may not need a immediate retrofit. But still, you see, we have to retrofit about 3.5 to 4 million houses, and then it's a huge task ahead. So whatever I said is a successful cases, small scale, is still for the larger, massive whole nation retrofit program. In comparison to that, it's just so small that whatever we did so far, and then this reaching to this bigger scale is a really a big, the problem and big challenge. And then, as I mentioned, incentives are about Nepali rupees 100,000 seems enough to inspire the people, mostly for the rural residential buildings or masonry buildings. For reinforced concrete, it might be much costlier, and then I don't know. Actually, we have not tested that, if that 1,000 is sufficient to motivate people to generate the demand for the larger scale. But at the same time, you see the way forward also, the same level of the program of the Gorkha earthquake reconstruction is enough to retrofit most of the buildings in Nepal. So in that way, it's not such a undoable program as well. So these are the conclusions. The Nepal's experience over 2 decades of seismic retrofitting has proven that seismic retrofitting is technically feasible and doable even in countries like Nepal, means low income countries. There are several successful models to replicate, and we have done that replications at least in some of the countries, neighboring countries. And then these some of the research that we did earlier on Nepalese buildings, including rural buildings, that shows that we can make them resilient enough, and that was tested by at least Gorkha earthquake. Not such a massive earthquake though, but it was good test. And then researchers not only produce scientific information but also help build confidence of the the researchers and then implementers as well, as sharing even those videos, and then others in addition to those scientific papers were useful to convince. And then experience and retrofitting of masonry buildings, schools, residences, or other buildings shows that we can economically retrofit most of the existing buildings, and I share the cost. For the most of these schools is 20 to 30% of the reconstruction cost. For the rural residential houses, even it's always less than 20% of the reconstruction cost. So that's quite, in that sense, they're doable financially. Confidence building among stakeholders is the only way to promote retrofitting effectively. So in confidence in the technology, confidence in terms of the cost, confidence that we can do it, and then the complemented by the capacities are very important. And we can start with simple public buildings based on our experience and lessons as a demonstration, and scale it up to all buildings and other infrastructures. The final one is there are some other retrofitting techniques that we could not promote also, and then depending on the simplicity, the simple methods, well tested, simple, easy to implement technology, these are the best to for wider acceptance. And then way forward, at least for the we consider that we have to have the national program at this stage. We have 753 local governments, and then for the public buildings, if we have just 3-4 public buildings retrofit per year, I think we can finish it in at least 10-15 years time for retrofitting of all public buildings. And then that's the minimum, and then we can do it. That's what we have been advocating. And the optimum program is to have at least Gorkha reconstruction level program that support about 4 million houses to retrofit. And then in our experience, I think we have to do it, and we can do it, and then we think that we have to do it as soon as possible. So these are all the points that I wanted to share with you. If you would like to know any of the details, I'll be very happy to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ramesh, for a very interesting and very comprehensive presentations. I would like, first of all, to give my hands to you. I was very impressed by the fact that you started with the stakeholder support, just in order really to start the program that Hanset had in mind, and that you have concluded with the need for more stakeholder support in order to continue to implement strengthening and retrofitting at a national level. And it is indeed essential that governments take on such programs, because we are not able to sustainably rebuild the building stock in any country in a timely and economic manner. It is very interesting that there were being, questions for you just after the second slide. So you'll have a long way there, and I will start with the first one. Let me just open it up.
Sure.
So I will ask the person, this Samuel Yeruslalmi. Sorry for my pronunciation. So the question is, I want to ask you, is it Nepal, that if Nepal has a national plan of seismic retrofitting school, and I think you partially address that, and if yes, how can the plan be realized in practice? And I don't know, Ismail, if you have Shmuel, if you have anything else to add, or Ramesh, you can answer.
Sure. So yeah, we have some the strategy, national strategy by the the Ministry of Education, Department of Education for schools retrofit. So we do have this strategy. Still, we don't have the national program to retrofit all the schools as a part of the reconstruction program. Let's say I shared you earlier that now the program that the Ministry of Education and then the Reconstruction Authority earlier led program have about 1,000 school buildings to retrofit. It's many of them are already completed and they are doing it, the remaining one. So we do have some of the programs, and then there are still some more programs they're coming up. Let's say we don't have the concrete yet signed program, but there are some more programs coming up. We still don't have the national school retrofitting program to complete all the schools yet. So that's the for your question.
Well, if you want to quickly answer or comment on that or show your experience, please unmute yourself. Otherwise, I think there was a comment from Ramesh Kanal about retrofitting in the western regions of Nepal.
Yeah, so there are some schools retrofitted in the western area also. There was a defeat program, and then some of the buildings were retrofitted in the the western hilly region, and then the southern part as well. But it's still not in a large numbers that we means Nepal retrofitted these schools in the west. So we do have that. We had earlier some programs and then retrofitted some, but it's still it requires more to do.
Thank you. And before we continue with the question, I would like to ask the audience if they can put on their camera, if they can, so that we can take snapshots of all of you currently online for our records. There is a question by Nurullah. Nurullah, if you are online and you want to ask the question directly, or I will read it out. Nurullah? Okay, the question is, can we access information such as engineering drawings and post-earthquake performance data for school buildings?
Yeah, so some of the work is already published. They especially some schools retrofitting guidelines, and then others. Some are still not the widely or open access. Those are only as a part of internal reports and others. So depending on that, but at the same time, for some of the simple retrofitting techniques, we have those guidelines which also include some of the type designs, so that you can find the details of all those elements required for different types of buildings.
And also there was a, sorry, somebody was talking. There was a follow-up on it about whether there is any information available for hospitals, whether you have implemented this into.
Oh yeah. Yes. So hospitals is relatively few hospitals are implemented so far. I think only 2 or 3 hospitals retrofitted, one community hospital, one hospital in Pokhara, and others. We do have, NCHED does not have all the information of the hospitals retrofit, but the hospitals are, we bringing the experience from these schools, trying to hospitals. But our experience now, retrofitting some of the hospitals is we have to have slightly different retrofitting techniques, mostly working from outside the building, so that you don't interrupt most of the ongoing functions, because schools sometimes we shift into other buildings and then continue the classes there and part by part, and then retrofit one block and other block. But hospitals we cannot close, because all the hospitals require to provide the services every day. So we have to have slightly different retrofitting techniques. More in case of schools, you can see from all of my slides that it's more distributed elements throughout the wall, small elements, and then that's better for the masonry buildings. But there are other approaches that you need a massive large elements from outside the block and then connect to that block. So that system may work better for the hospital. That's what we think, but we have not done for many hospitals, so I cannot answer.
Nurullah, if you want to have any comment on this.
Hello. Professor, thank you for letting me make comment. Thank you so much for the comment, because I asked it one because one of my colleagues is working on this topic, and I thought if there is opportunity to get data, it will be good. And I am so sorry because I had another discussion I missed, I think. Do you have data about the school buildings, open access? Can I reach online to this?
The retrofitted schools. I'm not sure if you get the all the designs open access, but we have the guidelines and we have some of the strategies for the retrofitting that's published by the government, which we can access.
Okay, do you have the post-earthquake performance information of these buildings?
Oh yeah, we do have that. That's already a published article on the performance of the retrofitted schools. So we do have that.
Okay,
so
thank you
maybe
so much.
Ramesh, if you can share the bibliography, then we can share it on our website with your profile, and people can access it.
Sure. That's possible.
That would be a good thing to do. We can go to the next questions from Sebastian Kaminski. In fact, there are two comments, one on the split bandage jacketing solutions, and it's quite a long assessment of it, and also still on the split and bandage, whether it does conform or it can conform with ASCII 41 performance guidelines. So Sebastian, maybe you want to summarize it yourself and ask the question yourself?
Yes. Hi Ramesh. Firstly, excellent presentation. Thank you. So really interesting. It was just two questions. Firstly, on the splint bandage and jacketing, I was wondering if there was a risk of buckling of the thin skin, and I'm thinking in particular where you've got the polypropylene mesh, which presumably it helps with tension force, but not necessarily bending. Yeah. And the second question was what sort of performance level you can guarantee to clients, because sometimes with these buildings we know that we're making things a lot better, but are we comfortable to legally say that yes, we're going to achieve a minimum performance level, or maybe we're not able to?
Yeah. So again, it depends on the retrofitting technique, and then for PP band there are very close ties connecting by the the wires exactly for that same region, and then PP band mesh is good for aid-away or brick and mortar buildings, so where the drilling and then passing through wires is very easy. For other types of the retrofit, we have to scrap some of the mortar and then connect it properly with the wall, not only as a separate layers of the material. So we have the calculations for that also. Generally we do over than whatever is required, because the calculation are more simplified calculations. And then in all of our there's even the highest level test, for example sec cable test and others, we did not see this type of the separations of the the elements. So I don't think there is a big problem on that. In terms of the performance, it's critical again. We cannot assure for this level of the safety, but most of the depending again, if it's a concrete based design, even if it's splint and bandage or the jacketing, then definitely we can give even the immediate occupancy level of performance for intensity 9 level 0.4, 0.5 G of the shaking. That's what we designed for the schools. For the residences is only for the life safety, and for the the PP band retrofitting technique is just for the collapse preventions, because it just hold the materials together. So we have those type of the defined performance for this different type of the retrofitting techniques as well. And then based on our experience from the Gorkha earthquake, those schools are designed for much higher level. That's why Gorkha earthquake was only 0.2 G level of shaking in Kathmandu Valley. That's why even minor cracks for those buildings. But if there is the 0.4, 0.6 G, definitely those buildings get cracks, but it still perform quite well. That's what our understanding is. But definitely more research is required in this field for masonry. There is not sufficient information in comparison to the concrete, the technology and buildings.
Thank you very much. Really clear.
Thank you very much, Ramesh. In fact, I have a comment on this on 3 different levels. Well, first of all, it was very good that you showed 3 different techniques relating to 3 different, let's say, masonry typology or masonry types, depending on their inherent capacity as unreinforced masonry structures and also on their scale. And, you know, going from softer, less stress demanding materials for the adobe to more consistent, concentrated elements for the split and bandage. But the other, I think the other comment or reflections that I would like to do is on the issue that Sebastian just raised, or whether you can actually state and confirm that the retrofitted structures perform as 2/3 or 75% of the new equivalent structures. The issue is very often the new equivalent structure doesn't exist, because you wouldn't build new masonry in the way that is built as existing, and it would not comply with the code in the first place. So you would then need to go to a different construction technology, which would then entails a completely different also construction production chain, and therefore create both economic and social issues in the context, and possibly escalate the costs, as you were pointing out with respect to the Gorka reconstruction programs. Yeah. So I think it's very important that both in standard and codes, we start thinking in ways that are different from assessing safety of existing and retrofitted building in relation to new build, to equivalent new build, because very often the equivalent new build is indeed not there. Yes, I am aware, Basir, that you have your hands out. There were some other questions first, so please be patient, and I will go through all of them if I can find them. Now I missed something. There is a question from another question from Ramesh Kanal. Ramesh, would you like to ask it yourself? I don't know if Ramesh is online and can hear me and can unmute. The question is about... Yeah, yes, please, Ramesh, and if you can put on your camera, that would be great. But if you cannot, it's entirely fine.
I'm Ramesh from Nepal. Currently, I am doing my research on the my municipality vulnerability assessment in Sandikharka municipality, especially private residential building. So I'd like to ask Ramesh Guragai sir, is there any help and guidance from ANSET to do help to my research project or not? Because I am working as an independently.
Sure, we can definitely help conceptually on, you know, providing all the guidelines, checklists, whatever we do have. We may not have, you know, I may not commit now with the financial support for your research, but the technical support will definitely do that for everyone in Nepal. Hence, it can support technically.
How can I contact? I did not find any info regarding the support as well as the guidance. Sure.
So, you know, you can contact to ANSET. So ANSET has the website and numbers and others email. So ANSET@ansett.org.np, that's the email. So you can send. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And there is a question from Rishi as well. Rishi, if you are, I saw you online a moment ago. Yes. So if you would like to unmute yourself, and please.
Hi, Dana. Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste, and thank you very much for this informative presentation. Okay, my camera is working now. I'm just wondering if we have monitored or we have some information on the impact and the community label, because the answer is, yeah, like I believe it is, you have so many programs and you did many retrofitting, like public buildings and others, and trainings, and like you mentioned about the television programs. And so basically, recently we are experiencing some small earthquakes in the western part of Nepal too, and where we are waiting for could be the big one in near future or somewhere. Is there any community, like the impact in the community? So they are starting to retrofit their houses and other infrastructure around there. Is how you can see the impact of these all works there.
Yeah, thank you. This is very important question. And then, we wonder also that, how impactful is our program. So we had a master's student doing from AIT with this topic. And then, I was one of the supervisors, and he did the comparison of 3 different communities. One community in the earthquake affected area, and then there was a retrofitting program, and then some of the houses were retrofit, and how the community think about the possibility of retrofit. There was another community away from the earthquake affected area, but again with some of the retrofitting interventions there, so they know some information. So and then third community was far away, there was no retrofitting program, and then and then no earthquake also. So how they feel, and there is a quite significant outcomes, very convincing one. That was one of the best thesis for this year for AIT. So it has very good, for example, earthquake affected area, and then our retrofitting program, those communities, the remaining one, they want to retrofit as soon as possible. There are some financial constraints and others, but the demand is very high there. In the other areas where there is the no earthquake, and then there was some retrofitting program, still some mixed, or let's say in middle, and then in the away there is no retrofitting program, and then away they don't have any information. And there are 3 levels that he analyzed. One is to decide on retrofit. It's not financial up to that level, it's more of the informations, and then the talking, and then convincing and all that. So and then once they decide, and many of them they can implement, and then only some they cannot. So the financial incentives come as a last. So not from the starting from the financial incentives. And then there is a this type of the quite detailed analysis of the impact of all these comprehensive retrofitting program, and then some programs without much awareness and capacity. So there is multiple analysis for that, and I think it's a thesis work. I don't know the papers are already published or not, but I think you can access the thesis.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because like in the far western and the western part, they experience like a very small earthquakes, even in mountainous areas, but maybe very less in the Terai region. So yeah, that would be very good to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rishi. And again, just a comment about the incentives seen from another perspective, and that I think also shed some light on the perception of risk in this community. Because, for instance, in Italy, after the 2016 earthquake in central Italy, the government has instated an incentive approach to retrofitting our very large building stock of very crumbly and vulnerable masonry structures by giving up to 110% incentive cost. And people are still saying, oh, this is not enough.
Yeah.
When it's very interesting that you're saying that a 20% incentive can then mobilize people to invest their personal resources to improve the standing of their own houses and even community building. So yes, it's very interesting how cultural difference play on the perception and the implementation of this. And Bashir, now it's your turn. Thank you very much for being so patient. Please ask your question, which is very interesting.
Thank you, Diana. I am Dr. Bashir, Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, Chuet from Bangladesh. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Ramesh for your nice and impressive presentation, because in context to the rural developing country, so these types of method is very, very important. And I also work on the similar technology, which is based on scrap tire. That means the unused tire, used tire for low-cost base isolation technique. So my question is that in your presentation, you just focused on the masonry wall, the retrofitting of the masonry wall. But in the case of frame structure, maybe the masonry wall we can retrofit using the same method. But what is your suggestion in the case of beam and also the slab? That means which low-cost technology we can apply to retrofit the beam and slab? Is this method is applicable for beam and slab?
Yeah, so this presentation focused, Bashir, thank you very much for the question, and very nice to see you in the webinar as well. You know, this presentation was focused only on masonry. We do have again the retrofitting techniques for the reinforced concrete buildings, the beam column jacketing, adding of the shear walls, using of the FRP and others. So these are very standard retrofitting techniques globally used, and then in our case also we use those. We have even the BRB and others practice in some of the buildings. So there are multiple ways. In our case, depending on the number of stories, if it's only 3 stories, then we found that making that as a hybrid buildings, retrofitting the walls with the splint and bandage, and then only limited columns jacketing, that's the most economic one. If it's more than that, then you have to go for the column and beam jacketing. If it's required. If it's sufficient only by jacketing of the columns, then much cheaper. But if you have to retrofit beam also, then it becomes quite complex. And then the retrofitting of the columns and beams require reasonable size. For example, in our case, is at least the 12 centimeter each side, because of the size of the rebars and the amount of the concrete required and others. So it becomes quite larger columns for the low-rise buildings. So there are multiple ways. We have retrofitted several reinforced concrete school buildings also, and other the 4, 5, 6 stories generally buildings that are earlier constructed. We do have very different presentations and the techniques on that also. But today I focus more only on masonry. Okay.
Thank you very much. Because I raise this question because some masonry structure also have some floor, say 2-story, one is 2-story masonry building. So in that case, only the slab. So in that case, I think we can propose another method for the slab or beam.
Yeah.
It's like FRP material like this one.
Sure. So in our experience,
but the FRP material is very costly. So I want to know, is there any low-cost technique for the slab or beam?
Yeah. So I don't know the construction practice. I think in Bangladesh you have the flat slab, but
yes.
in our case, especially for the masonry buildings, we never had to retrofit any of the concrete slabs so far. Now, all those hundreds, because in Gorkha earthquake, for example, in any earthquake, there is not many buildings that the slabs are damaged, and then in general, it's most of the general repair work you may need, and then that's very simple, that you have to add a layer of the the thinner concrete layer with a again small mesh of the reinforcement mesh. That's what you have to do in worst case. But in our case, I think less than 5% of the buildings were retrofitted for the slabs. All 95% we never need to do. But you have to do, if you have to do, then there are methods to do that as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. And I would like to invite you for a presentation for my undergraduate student.
When I come next to Chittagong, I will do it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bashir. And there is a comment from Seren. Ilter, I hope, or Serene, sorry if I don't pronounce your name properly. Serene, if you want to unmute yourself. Hello? Maybe it's not.
Hi.
Yes, yes, Serene. Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. It is really informative. I am an urban planner and I'm living in Turkey. You know, Turkey is facing harsh problems after that earthquakes, and this government politics is to how can I say contribution to reconstruction. They don't prefer retrofitting or reinforcement projects. So it is actually a good, very, very good examples for us. And also it is sustainable and economically feasible. So it is really hopeful, and really it should be more common. It should be I think more published. It should be more published because it is very how can I say there is a very much there are very much lessons it should be take for other governments like Turkey, Syria, Morocco, and it is also for, I think, useful. It will be useful for cultural heritage also, because yes, the first the most firstly, priority is for humans, but also cultural heritage never can be returned. So these retrofitting techniques is more useful also for cultural heritage, ancient buildings. That's what I mean, and this is my contribution. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Seren. 100%. I agree with your the comments, and we also had the similar problem in Nepal also, that it's very difficult to promote retrofit in comparison to reconstruction. There are some regions that we learned again lessons. Number one is we have limited the technical people who have the in-depth understanding of retrofit, starting from the concept, how it works, and also to the details that how to implement. So if we have very few people who understand these, and then many people they don't understand, then they definitely promote whatever they know it. So that's the one of the reason is that. The second is, again, it's there are the bigger funding organizations, again considering from the quality control point of view and then mass point of view, they are worried a lot that they for the new construction everything is set, the contractors know what to do, norms are there, the construction practice is there, the engineers are there, so they go for that one. And then for the people level also, they don't have sufficient informations, and then the understanding, especially in terms of technical feasibility, how feasible are those retrofitting techniques, even if we retrofit, how much safety, and there are some questions here also. So it's a genuine question. So because of those questions, it's difficult. Nepal realizes the importance of retrofit only in the third year of reconstruction. At the beginning they started all the new constructions and then our reconstruction, and then only on third year we focus more. And then in Nepal's the lessons by National Reconstruction Authority, it's very clearly written, if we were able to do the reconstruction again, let's say starting from the beginning, what we would have focused more, And it's very clear point. One of the point is we would have promoted retrofit more, because that way even the government funding would have been 1/3, because for the new construction they gave 300,000, for reconstruction only 100,000. So it would have been much less. Second is the time would have been much shorter, because the retrofitting is finished in a limited period of time. Third is even for the, even if the people get 300,000, they spend another 1,200,000 or 1,400,000 to build their house. So it would have been much economic for even the communities and individuals. So because of those multiple regions, and then in terms of safety also, masonry buildings anyway, even if they finally construct masonry buildings with all these concrete bands and others, retrofitted are sometimes even much better, Dina, than the new construction with just a small concrete band. So in that sense, more resilient as well. So Seren, this is, I think, Seren, this is all, this was an opportunity, and thanks to Dina for organizing this. So we have to listen and then share. It may not be, immediate to influence the government. It's complex also sometimes, but, we have to try.
Indeed, the issue really, Ramesh, is, and perhaps here your international experience can come to help us a bit. How do we actually make retrofitting and retrofitting program more valid across different countries, and how do we export that experience and make it applicable in other countries?
Yeah.
There is a hand raised by Kautar Shugrani. Kautar? Hello? I think you have unmuted yourself, so we should be able to hear you. Please put your camera on if you can. No? Hello?
Hello.
Oh, yes, Kautar, we can hear you. Yes, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation. I have a question concerning the historical buildings. Is it the same techniques we have for for the stone buildings, or it's just applicable for masonry buildings?
Yeah, so the cultural buildings are different. So in none of these retrofitting technique may directly be applicable for cultural buildings because of the the materials issue, and then reliability, and then so many issues that we have to consider. And then also in terms of the cultural heritage, depending on what level of the cultural heritage. In some cases it will be we don't expect anybody to even modify anything. So it may not be directly applicable for the cultural heritage, and then we should not do the copy and do the same method that is used for the residences and schools or other general buildings to the cultural heritage. It has slightly different retrofitting method for that. Mostly, they're trying to use the almost similar material and system and not change. And then second principles, at least in Nepal, we have been promoting or suggesting for cultural heritage is once you touch, do it very nicely so that you don't have to alter it again and again. But at the same time respecting the the materials and others. There are many other guidelines, UNESCO guidelines, let's say, for the cultural heritage. So very different.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yes. I think the fundamental difference here is that all the approaches that have been presented by Ramesh today, they actually are requiring plastering and are requiring covering the finishes of the walls in order to make it work together with the original brickwork or stonework, and that would not be necessarily applicable or to an heritage structures where you want the original finish to be visible, but also you might not want to put together different type of materials in that way. But yes, there is a lot of attention to the retrofit and to the restoration and improvement of seismic behavior of heritage buildings in different parts of the world. And there are the guidelines of what we call the ISCARSA ICOMOS scientific international committee that looks after this. And in fact, we will share that on our website as well, so it can be of useful resources for some of you. Here, the focus is really on making sure that schools are safe. I think it was very important that you pointed out, Ramesh, that the schools that have been retrofitted were also used as shelter in the aftermath of the Gorka earthquake. And this really highlights the importance of building up the confidence of the people towards the performance of this building. And again, you don't need to be an expert, but if you are being sufficiently educated, you can have a sense of the understanding of when a building performs well and when it doesn't. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments from the audience. Thank you very much all for participating. And again, if you want to put your camera on and join me in congratulating and thanking Ramesh for such an interesting and conversations and presentation and the following up discussion. Thank you all very much and to the next one, which will take place towards the end of October, and it will be in relation to infrastructure resilience. So a completely different viewpoint delivered by the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. And then we have another very exciting talk towards the mid of November on use of artificial intelligence in risk assessment. So quite, again, different aspects of the same equation and what interests all of us. Thank you again for joining us, and hope to see you all soon in the next weeks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Ramesh.
Yeah, thank you, Dina.
Thank you, Asana and Rafa, for attending.
Thank you, Dina. It was very good, the engaging discussions. Thank
Yes.
you, Ramesh.
And
I was in fact going to ask just the time span in days, if you can, roughly how much days it takes for a school to fully, recover from this operation.
Oh yeah, so generally it takes 3 months to 4 months.
3 months, okay.
To retrofit. So
Okay.
that's the tentative.
this is
Thank
with
you.
the split and bandage
Yeah.
approach. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So if reconstruction generally takes almost a year for the
Yes, exactly.
building. So
Exactly.
you can do it in even if it's 4 months, then it's just 1/3 of the time, and then the materials also you need only
Yeah,
a lot
exactly.
less material. So it's in that sense also it's more environment friendly, and then
Low carbon footprint then.
yeah, carbon footprint.
I was actually very surprised to see your calculation on the entire building population in the country. I mean, that's very, very inspiring to see that, you can even envision something of that scale. But if you see the general building stock, you mentioned the calculations are mostly on the masonry, but when you also consider populated dense cities and RC construction, which is mostly maybe prevalent, how does that, it may not be a linear increase, but any ideas? Are you also working on RC? I'm sorry, I'm not aware.
Of course, we are
Yeah.
working on RC, but you know, if I include both of them, then it will be even
No,
much
this
less
was, yeah.
so talk. So that's why I included masonry, and I'm personally more masonry person. So that's the reason. But the NCET is supporting for reinforced concrete buildings retrofit as well. But you know, the total building stock is still in Nepal is about 20% reinforced concrete and 80% of masonry. For the retrofitting purpose, the masonry is in the the first priority. For the new construction is reinforced concrete, because reinforced concrete is going even into the rural area now. And then in urban area, it's exponentially. So even nobody construct masonry buildings anymore for in the urban area. But rural area, there is no choice even now for the masonry building. It's reaching there, but in a very bad way. So the quality of reinforced concrete buildings are getting so poor. So
exactly,
our focus for the new construction is for reinforced concrete generally. But for the retrofitting is still the masonry, because even if we retrofit reinforced concrete buildings, the numbers are still less, let's say.
I
and
was
then
actually thinking
slightly resilient also in that sense.
Yeah, I was trying to extrapolate to other countries, maybe, recent example in Turkey, as somebody mentioned, like even in rural areas, you see RC buildings, which are more prevalently being built. So yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramesh, and always a pleasure. And if you can let us have some of your publications, maybe we can also distribute them online for people to read about it.
Sure. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.